What if I told you that the United States government was in possession of UFOs? Would you believe me? Probably not. Everybody knows anybody who sees lights in the sky are crazy or mistaken. Right? But what if a major in the United States Air Force with 14 years in the intelligence community told you that the United States government was in possession of UFOs? Then it might be a little more serious. David Grusch is a high-ranking military official who, according to him, received an invitation onto the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Task Force. You heard that right. That's an official government task force whose purpose was to detect, analyze, and catalog UAPs that could potentially pose a threat to U.S. national security. I'll change the name from UFOs to UAPs doesn't make it sound any less crazy, but this is legitimate. This is a program crafted by the United States government to monitor UAPs. And before you say, where's the evidence, I'd like to remind you that the United States government has already openly admitted that UAPs are real, and they claim that they don't know what they are. Take for instance this video of these Navy soldiers struggling to lock onto this object. This actually is a declassified video from the Pentagon. This was released alongside a couple others several years ago, and the government openly admitted that these were real videos and that they did not know what was controlling these craft. The fact of the matter is that something is in our skies. What exactly that something is up for debate. Which is why the UAP Task Force was commissioned, and when they put in a request to bring a new face onto the team, David Grusch was recommended because of his trust and his rank in the military. Like I said, he was an intelligence officer. In his own words, he actually expected to find nothing and was simply thinking that this task force was going to look really good on his resume, but after he passed the usual security clearances and accepted his new role, the truth of what he found was going to warp his sense of reality. Now, since the nature of his position on the task force was to find out more about this phenomenon, he started conducting interviews. And I'm not talking about walking up to some random hobo on the street saying, hey man, I heard that you saw something in the sky. These were high-ranking military officials, some of the most trusted and tested men in the United States. He rapidly began to hear testimony about massive triangular crafts, some of which were the size of football fields, and stories that completely defied our understanding of physics. Yeah, sure. People have been saying that since the beginning of time, right? Some of the oldest mythologies of humans involve lights in the sky and beings descending from the stars, right? But if this is true, where are the pictures? Where's the evidence? Well, it seems that Mr. Grusch has gotten his hands on the evidence, and he wants to share it with all of us. But a particularly powerful enemy is trying to stop him. His employer, the United States government. The more interviews that David conducted, the more people that he asked, the more clear the picture became. Not only were these strange phenomena completely real, but it was impossible that the government didn't know about it. The entire UAP task force that Grusch worked for might have been a red herring, just a distraction to make it seem like the government was looking for answers. But over time, he came to believe that the government already had the answers. They were just hiding it from you. Through his duties across 4 years of working on this issue, Mr. Grusch received consistent but secret claims that the government had not only successfully recovered crash-landed UAPs, but also that some of them still had biologics inside. Which is vague, but we can take it to mean some physical form of something that at least once was living was inside. And if that wasn't a wild enough claim for you, he would then go on to say that a Black Operations government project had successfully reverse-engineered these UAPs, and that they were willing to kill to keep that secret. You gotta be f***ing kidding me, right? Like, you mean to tell me that across thousands of years of reports of lights in the sky and hundreds of sightings a week in the United States alone, and the vast concept of trying to hide an entire element of reality from the general public, that somehow our government managed to single-handedly cover up the existence of these things? If this is true, why doesn't somebody get Congress involved? Well, he did exactly that. After years of researching this phenomenon and becoming completely convinced that the United States government had an extremely small black operation dedicated entirely to covering up the phenomenon and reverse engineering its technologies, he filed a whistleblower complaint and testified under oath about his findings. Believe it or not, both sides of the political aisle were completely electrified by these accusations, with the likes of Matt Gaetz and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez actually working together to get to the bottom of this. Leave it to literally otherworldly beings to be the only thing to give a little unity in American politics. But Grusch didn't testify alone, as many people seem to think. He was backed by other military officers. Ryan Graves offered testimony that after upgrading the radar system his squadron used at a base near Virginia Beach, they began to immediately detect phenomena that were not consistent with any known human aircraft. He says that at first they thought these were glitches, but soon sightings of actual UAPs became an open secret amongst his peers, and he even shared that one of the infamous declassified videos was actually capturing an event that nearly led to a cancellation of flight practice at Virginia Beach, as told by an internal email amongst military men. He noted that the next day the email had been deleted and the topic was never mentioned again, which he found extremely suspicious, and he began to suspect that a classified special access program or team may be trying to subdue the information. Ryan Graves alleged in no uncertain terms that the United States had knowledge of these crafts, though he did stop short of claiming that he was aware of a government cover-up. But there was yet another testimony. David Fravor, a retired commander in the United States Navy. And according to his testimony in 2004, he and another jet were tasked with approaching an unknown object that had been rapidly elevating between 20,000 and 80,000 feet for several days according to their radar. Bro, this is at a congressional hearing, and as they approached their objective, they saw a disturbance in the water, and several thousand feet below them they observed a white tic-tac shaped object that had no rotors, no propellers, and no flight control surfaces like wings whatsoever. He stated that it seemed as though the object allowed them to follow it and keep up with it for a little while, before rapidly disappearing over the horizon and being lost by both of the jets, for less than a minute until it popped back up over 60 miles away. He also noted that infrared imagery did not indicate any heat or propulsion system that we know of to be moving the craft. He also gave specific credit to Tom DeLonge of Blink-182, noting that his work with To the Stars Academy, which you were probably making fun of a few years ago, was instrumental in pressuring the government to open up about this topic. And he said that to his great surprise, the incident was never investigated or questioned in any way by his commanding officers, but the crew that went after he did managed to get a video. But despite David Fravor giving props to Tom DeLonge for getting the government to open up, David Grusch claims they're not opening up. And he stated that he actually attempted to report these Black Ops programs in 2021, where he received extreme hostility, professional alienation, no pun intended, and death threats. Needless to say, this hearing was a huge deal, but David actually stopped short of revealing the locations of actual physical UAPs and the names of the politicians who were involved in covering this project up, because he is still bound to his oath of protecting American secrets. He legitimately could face prison time for releasing any classified information to the public that he's not cleared for. But if that's true, how did he tell us all of this? Shortly after the initial Newsweek interview that captured the world went live, David Grusch sat for a long-form video with YouTubers Jesse Michaels and Yes Theory, and dove much deeper into these wild claims than he was able to do in Congress. He states that everything I have told you he said so far was actually with government permission, and yes, those include his claims that the United States owns many of these crafts, and that non-human beings had been found inside of them. But before you get too excited, this doesn't inherently mean that there's any actual weight to it. It simply means he asked the government if he was allowed to talk about it, and they said yes. Because before whistleblowing, as all people in the intelligence field have to do, he had to submit a Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review form, shorthand called a DOPSR, that is a mouthful, outlining exactly what he intended to claim. According to him, some things were permitted and some weren't, but since the DOPSR form explicitly states that you still can't talk about classified information even when you're no longer an employee of the government, it's very clear that he's walking the narrow path of what he's allowed to address. When directly asked if the biologics he says were found inside the UAPs were still alive or always dead, he said he couldn't get into that, because he hadn't been pre-approved on that topic with the Department of Defense. He also said that it's kind of a catch-22, because if they do censor information found within his DOPSR requests and tell what agency is trying to censor it, it's kind of admitting that there is some substance to it, and while many of us look to him as one of the primary harbingers of disclosing the truth about UAPs to the public, and ideally telling us what the hell is in those things, it's also worth noting that his job was never to disclose aliens to the public in and of itself. His job in this capacity is to blow a whistle to a secret government program that supposedly has extensive knowledge of these craft, and apparently, the creatures that inhabit them. I mean, are they extraterrestrial, are they interdimensional, are they fucking time travelers, whatever it is, by his explanation, it's almost beyond the scope of human understanding by today's standards. Now we can argue about who's in control of the UAP all we want, but at a bare minimum, the crafts perform feats that are beyond both human capabilities and human understanding of physics. Which means either we've got everything wrong, or the things in those ships don't play by the same rules we do. But come on, I mean, who is this guy? Who is David Grusch? What if he's crazy? What if he's not even in the military, right? That much is pretty easy to prove. The government refers to him as a former National Reconnaissance Officer representative and an employee of the Department of Defense many, many times, and his resume is actually viewable online. Just as he submitted to the government, I assume, and along with his high-ranking military service that has a clear paper trail, including references in military newspapers and exercises going back for many years, He also has a bachelor's degree in physics from the University of Pittsburgh and a Master of Arts with honors in intelligence studies from the American Military University. It is also worth noting that so much of his education is related to space in some way or another, and he's got a very long list of credentials, along with the 2 high-ranking military officers who testified alongside him. They also vouched for him with the weight of their decades of credentials. So it is beyond doubt whatsoever that he has the education that he says he has, and that he's held the positions that he says he's held in the government, including his security clearance and his approved access to classified information. But that doesn't rule out the possibility of, say, mental illness, delusion. In fact, shortly after his whistleblowing came to national headlines, there was a huge report claiming that Grusch had a history of threatening to harm himself and suffered from PTSD from his time in Iraq. Like a good YouTuber, I looked into these claims, and what I found shocked me. It seems to me that the threats of self-harm and the PTSD allegations stem from one incident, an incident where police got involved. According to a Freedom of Information Act request filed by Ken Klippenstein on behalf of The Intercept, Mr. Grusch had a run-in with the law in early 2018. His wife had called the police and said that he had told her, "I'm just waiting on you to kill me," which was very out of character for him, and she called the police. She told the officers that he was drunk, she believed he was an alcoholic, but believe it or not, there actually doesn't seem to be a credible threat of self-harm, nor does anyone actually claim that he really made one. The PTSD allegation is noted alongside his military credentials in the report as being possible, although he did later expand on that a little bit and say that it's something that he's already worked past. So this is what people use to discredit a decorated 14-year Air Force veteran. Come on, guys, you gotta do better than that. But they're not just using slander to discredit old Dave, they're trying to block him legally as well. As of this year, David Grusch's security clearance has lapsed, and since he left his governmental capacity that required it, he is actually not eligible to enter what's called a SCIF, a Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, which is a top-secret room where classified information is divulged. In accordance with his DOPSR, he is not leaking anything that he's not been expressly permitted to talk about, and I will once again emphasize that him receiving clearance to talk about these things is not evidence that they are true. But this bold claim that he will give direct names and locations of individuals and craft hinges on his ability to get his security clearance back. In pursuit of this, Congress introduced an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, specifically requesting that David Grusch's security clearance be reinstated, and it was added to the bill. It's also worth noting that the United States Congressman Eric Burleson did not seem to believe in the UAPs themselves, but was extremely interested in at least finding out what this hidden program might be and whether or not there was a government cover-up hidden from Congress. Senator Chuck Schumer introduced what's called the Schumer Amendment, and together Congress has proposed the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023, which would not only use subpoenas and investigations to expose this corruption and give domain of these craft back to the actual government instead of this black ops hidden program, but also would form a committee to investigate and release everything that is known about these objects, operating under an assumption of disclosure. And that means that basically they would release everything unless there was an extreme reason not to release it. And if I'm going to be honest with you, I could really say them seeing that. How are you going to feel if you come to find out that America's been hiding UFOs for the last 80 years? This amendment to the act is bipartisan and has been approved by both of the major political parties in old two-party system America, but there's been some trouble now that it's nearly time to incorporate. At least that's what I was hearing, and I looked into it a little bit more. And while this budget is about to be passed into law, there are some rumors online that some senators on the inside are set to reject it. In fact, specifically the rumors I heard were that these senators or congressmen had top contributions from Boeing and Lockheed Martin, who were implicated in this entire thing many months ago. But we'll get to that, you two. We'll get there. So the best that I could find were just basically some Twitter rumors. I don't see anything substantial to really verify that anybody's trying to shut it down. This is all just swirling, just so you know. But I did personally make a few phone calls to senators and congressmen yesterday to express my interest and their support of the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023. And I highly encourage you to do the same with your local officials. Don't let them do this again, bro. The UAP Disclosure Act must be passed to bring an end to the law that gave the government the ability to do this in the first place. You heard me right. There was a law passed hidden in plain sight that gave the government the full power to do this in 1954. I'm going to talk about that law and way more about David Grusch and plenty more about these topics if you guys like this video, so make sure you leave me some feedback here. And I'm going to be totally honest, this one's just opinion now, of course, but in my opinion, if at this point you're just outright rejecting David Grusch and not at least hoping that this bill passes so the truth can come out one way or another, whether it's fake and nonsense or it's the single most important story ever told in the history of humankind, then I just think you're biased. I think you're in some kind of denial. How can you not at least want the investigation to take place with all of these military officials? It's in the best interest of all of humanity for this to come to light. And I'm going to be following it to the very end, so make sure that you hit that subscribe button, guys. Trying different things out, seeing what sticks. I got some more meme videos in the works too, even though the last one didn't do too hot. Always leave your comments, always leave your suggestions. I'm reading them all. Stay happy, stay free. Most importantly, stay safe. I'll see you guys very soon.